Hi, my name is Emma Fassio and welcome to my YouTube channel where I share my passion for knitting and creative ideas. Today I want to show you here my Luna sweater, how I worked it with a tutorial step by step, and how I made it by working on my proportions, by playing with in a creative way with different threads. I will tell you how I made it by looking at the folded neckline collar that I made it with a ribbing and the raglan increases to make the yoke, then how I put on hold the stitches for the sleeves and how many stitches to cast on for your body proportion. We are going to talk about body length, how I wanted it this way because I wanted to wear it on high waist pants and not too wide, but then you have to follow your own taste. How I worked the sleeve to make this puffy effect at the end with the final ribbing border. In the description below you can find more details about the threads I used, the body sizes and the gauge I had to make this sweater Luna. But the important thing I will tell you, how to create it in a creative way, because you have to follow your body proportions, your taste and forms and colors, because only when you're going to wear something that you love, you will communicate it to the world. So now let's see how I worked it step by step. Before going to tell you how to create this sweater on your body proportion, I want to talk you a little bit about threads and washing. Then we will talk about blocking at the end of the video. But if you're using a thread that you already know how it behaves when you wash it and block it, you already know how your sweater is going to modificate itself when you're going to wash it. So you know how it changes in height and width. So you can just go on, cast on, and see how it works. If instead you are using a new thread, my advice is to make a sample and wash it and block it in order to understand how it behaves. And I suggest to make it a little bit bigger than 10 centimeters because you have to measure how many stitches and count how many stitches you have in 10 centimeters for 10 centimeters stitches and rows. And if you want, you can do all the math. But if you want to work it by flowing and just be a creative, you need also to understand how it behaves after washing and blocking, because some threads might duplicate, you wash it and then it just like puffs becomes bigger. And so you have to understand this, because if you want to have a tighter fit, you have to work with noise, because it's going to be loose when you wash it. But gauge can also influence the work and how the thread behaves by washing, because if you have a tight gauge, what happens? It will lose less, and if you have an open work, it will become much bigger when you wash it. So now let's see how we are going to work Luna. I wanted to show you the threads I've used to knit my Luna sweater, and then we'll see how to cast on and everything. I used 4 threads, 2 threads of fin, that's 1 thread of Ljuv, and 1 thread of this beautiful alpaca that an Irish girl has hand-dyed that I found at the Knit Festival in Barcelona. So I'm going to work these 4 threads together, and I will show you how thin is. It's a skein of 100 grams by 1,500 meters, so it's very, very thin. And in order to use it, I made up with a winder, so I can use a thread from the inside and the outside. Okay, now we are going to cast on for our Luna sweater, and it's a top-down sweater, so we are going to start from the neckline and work the yoke in the round. I'm going to cast on 72 stitches, and then I will show you why, because 72 is perfect and it can be divided by 3, and it's important. Then I will show you more in the details. I will use the long-tailed cast on, so I need 2 threads, and in order to understand how long my tail can be to cast on the 72 stitches, I hold my hand like this and I make this like an 8. So and it depends from the size of the hand, but let's say a medium size and held like this, so then you can try and see how many stitches you can cast on with your size or your hand dimensions. Now, so I have to make 7 like 8 this form of infinite around my fingers, and I always prefer to take a little bit more of thread because I prefer to cut the tail, then unravel the casted on stitches and cast on again. So now I will show you from the beginning. What I prefer to do is to make a slip knot for the first stitch. Sometimes some people do not make it, but I like to make it because it makes a more definite first stitch. Then I will hold the tail toward me like this, and the working thread on the opposite side, because I need to hold on my index finger the working yarn and on my thumb the tail. And I will put my hands in what it looks like a sling, and you know, we've called it in the years a sling position, but it makes it, you know, easy to see it, how it's better to hold our hands. So what it happens, let's see it again. I take my 2 fingers and I put the threads on my index finger, my thumb, like this, and then I hold it with the threads with the other fingers. I take my point, I go like this from after the first stitch. At the bottom of my thumb, I go through the loop like this, and then I pick up the thread from over like this, like from the top under, and then I go through the loop again with my knitting needle, and then I pull with my thumb the thread. And now I've casted on my second stitch. So let's see, you know, how to do it again. So with the point of my working needle, I go at the bottom of my thumb through the loop, then over, I pick up the thread, and then through the loop again, and then I pull. So now I have 3 stitches, and now I'm going to cast on my 72 stitches for the cast on edge. Okay, ready. See, now we have casted on all stitches, and I'm working with 4.5 millimeter points. And if you do not want to use a magic loop technique, I suggest, especially if you're also a beginner, to use shorter points, you know, the one that are shorter, with the cable that together all will measure 40 centimeters. So after having casted on all the stitches, we have to place that is a marker that will indicate our beginning of the round, because we can use the tail, but then we might lose track at the end of the sweater. So we need something to hang on our needle like this, and it's a marker, and in pattern instructions it's usually called M for marker, and I place it like this just by hanging on my needle, because I need it to be always in the same place where I want it to indicate something. So if I'm going to just start working my stitches on the left needle like this, it might have a loose thread between, so we do not have a really nice joining. So I suggest to cast on 1 more stitch, and this is why it was important to have the tail toward us on the thumb and the working thread on the index finger, because by doing this I slip the stitch on my left needle and I work 2 stitches together. And also, see, if you work with many threads, it can happen, so be careful to have all the threads, pick up all the threads when you work your stitches. And if you're a beginner, I suggest to use 1 single thread, so it might be easier. But see, if I pull the thread, the tail, there I will have a really nice and polished joining. So this is a little trick that can help you make really nice sweaters. So now I'm going to work 1 by 1 ribbing. So I will make 1 knit stitch and 1 purl stitch. I usually work continental, but you can work with any technique that you might prefer. I will show you now, if you're a beginner, how I work my stitches. But I forgot to tell you that first, when joining, you have to check that all your stitches are in the same direction. Because if you see this, you might not have your sweater, but you have something that it's going to turn out and it will not look comfortable. So now I'm going to work my stitches, and I will show how I make a knit stitch. For the gauge, I usually hold my thread like this, but you might prefer other ways like this one, or there is another way to hold the thread that it's like this. You have to test which one you prefer, because we use our hands in many different ways and it's very personal how we use them. So to make a knit stitch, I go through the stitch and I pick up the thread like this. For the purl stitch, I bring the thread on my index finger like this, and then with the right hand needle I go in the back like this. I come out from the stitch, this is the purl stitch, and I work my thread like this. I go and pick it up or bring down my finger, but the important thing is that the thread goes from the right to the left, and then I pull through the loop of my stitch and I just work it. So knit and purl like this. If you're a beginner, it might be difficult at the first round to make all the purl stitches, so you might prefer to make a knit all around the round and then start the ribbing on the second. Now I'm going to work it to my marker. So now I finished my first round by ribbing with the purl stitch, and then often in your pattern section you find SM, that's a slip marker. What does it mean? To slip the marker from the left needle to the right one, so it's going to hang exactly in the same place, and then you're going just to start knitting again, knit purl, so as stitches appears on to make the second round. Now we have a folded neckline, so we are going to make the rounds that we need before the detail that will make a nice folded neckline. Okay, now that I've knitted some rounds, I wanted to show you how to purl a stitch in a quick way. See how I go up with the point on my right hand needle and pick the thread and pull it through the stitch. Okay, it is important that you look at the stitches, because if you go with the thread under and you pull it through, see that your stitch goes from the left to the right and the other stitches go from the right to the left. So what happens that if you have this, when you're going to work them, and I will show you by your purl stitch will look like this, and to make an open stitch you're going to knit it through the back loop, otherwise you will have a twisted stitch. So go and pick it up, and the important thing that the thread goes from the right to the left. But if you go with a point like this and do not use what your index finger, it is, oh, see, I forgot one of the 4 threads. It can happen when you have all the different threads working together, so be careful to pick them all while working. Now I've decided that the height of my neckline, my border, it's going to be like this, and it's for me it means 8 rounds. I'm going to make a purl round because I want to make a nice fold, because it's a folded neckline. I will show you an important thing to have a loose cast on, because I will show you a technique that will allow you to join the neckline without sewing, because one way is to sew it after you have made all the sweater, so you sew it folded, but I will show you soon how to make it without sewing right away by working. So now I'm going to make all my round by purling, and the folded line will be very nice and defined, and the purl stitches that on the inside of my work, it's like a knit stitch, it's going to make it easy to fold. And then I will make other 8 rounds of ribbing, knit 1, purl 1, in order to have the same height outside and inside. Okay, ready. Now I've worked the other 8 rounds in the ribbing one by knitting 1 and purling 1, and I have my nice folding line by the purl stitches that I've worked in between. Now you can use also the traditional technique that when you're finished your sweater, you can fold it and sew it with the tail. But now I want you to show you how to fold it and work it together with a round by knitting all stitches. So I'm going to use the tail to understand which stitch corresponds to my first knit stitch by considering that it's on the wrong side, so it's going to be a purl stitch on the wrong side and it corresponds to my knit stitch. I go through my first stitch as to knit and through the stitch underneath, and I'm going, see, like this, I'm going to work a knit stitch through there and through the stitch. Now be careful, now I have the 4 threads, so I'm going to be careful to pick them all, and then I'm going to thread through the loops my knit stitch. I'll do the same for the second stitch, because I'll do all knitting stitch. I will look for the next stitch, and so I'm going to work a knit stitch through the border and through my stitch on the needle. And I will do this for the entire round. Let's do it once more together, one more time. See, I go through there, I pull the thread, and if it's difficult, I'll just go once through the cast on stitch and then after inside my loop. So now I have 3 stitches. Look how nice it looks in the inside. It looks like it has been sewn. It's very, and I will do it to my marker all around. And next we are going to put the markers for the raglan increases. Are you ready? Now we are going to place the 4 markers for the raglan increases. I've changed my beginning of the round markers. See, I made it double, but I wanted a different one, so not only in color, but also in size, in order to distinguish it from the other 4 that I need for my raglan lines and increases to define that. So what happens now, I will also explain you why I casted on 72 stitches, and I advise, especially at the beginning, if you're a beginner, to use a number of stitches that is a multiple of 3, or that you can divide by 3, because I need 72 stitches that I divide by 3 and I obtain 24, and then I put 24 stitches in front and 24 stitches in the back, and I have another third, that's the other 24, that I divide by 2, and I put it in the on the shoulder lines. So I have 24 in the back, 24 in the front, and 12 on each shoulder point. So this is important because the same works divided by 3 and then by 2, and you place the 1/3 in the front, 1/3 in the back, and the other 1/3 you divide it by 2 and you put it in the shoulder lines. We have the marker in the center back, so my back is going to be divided by 2, so I'm going to knit 12 stitches before placing the first marker for the first raglan line. So I take the marker and I just place it like that. Now I'm going to work the other 12 stitches. That's going to be my shoulder point, and now I'll put the other marker. Now I'll just count all the stitches. I need some more stitches before I have knitted 12, and at this point I place the other marker. What happens now? You knit 24 and you place the marker, then knit 12, place the other marker, and then you will knit 12 and get to the beginning of the round marker. When I've placed all my markers, my project will look like this. I have the center back marker in the center back where I have 24 stitches for the back, and then on the first shoulder point I have 12 stitches, and on the front I have 24 stitches, and on the other shoulder point 12 stitches. Now I'm going to work the knit considered classical increase for the raglan yoke, and knit front back. I'm going to knit to one stitch before my marker, and here I'm going to make knit front back. So I knit one stitch, but then I will knit again the same stitch through the back loop like this. And this is one of the raglan increases. I slip the marker, knit front back like this. So, and then I will knit again to one stitch before the second marker. I'm going to make before and after the increase. I will do this on all 4 markers until I reach again the beginning of the round marker. So what happens? Often in the pattern section you will find knit to one stitch before marker, knit front back, slip marker, knit front back. Repeat 4 times and then knit to marker M, the beginning of the round. So let's see again. Knit to one stitch before marker, knit front back, slip marker, knit front back. Then you do it again for the second marker and knit front back, slip marker, knit front back. And you do it on the third and fourth marker and then knit to M marker. Now you have to make 1 round of increases and 1 round only of knit stitches. So you will build your yoke by alternating 1 round of increases and 1 round of knit stitches. Now, after a couple of increase rounds, I can change my cable to a longer one and have regular points. I see they're a little bit longer, and see how now you start to see the raglan line with the increases. So what do? I make 1 round with the increases and 1 round without increases. So knit to 1 stitch before marker, knit front back, slip marker, knit front back, and then for the entire round knit to M, and then 1 round of knit stitches, and my yoke will grow. Okay, see now that the yoke is growing and it looks really nice. Well, I have a really colorful thread, so you might see less this nice line that it's building, thank you to the fact that we're knitting next to each other to knit front back stitches, and you can see this little, elongated stitch that defines the raglan. Now, I wanted to give you 2 advices before going on with my yoke. I usually, as you can see, work with the 60 centimeter cable with regular points, because I find that when all my stitches are next to each other on my left needle, I work quickly because I don't have to pull up on my needles all the time, all the stitches. So this is much easier, and when I want to try it on, I use a cable connector to make the cable longer, so I can easily try it on and see at what point I'm going to finish the yoke, that I will explain you soon, because there is one classical point, considered the classical point. Another advice that I wanted to give you is that sometimes we might lose track at what round we are knitting, at which point we are. So if you see this little, thread over here, it means that I made a knit front back in the previous round. So now I have to make my knit round. So I'm going to knit my stitch. See, I see the thread there of the front back, and then I'm going to knit. So I'll do it the same. So on when I have many threads, sometimes it can happen to lose one, so just be careful. See, I see there, and I just knit. Now, so I know that in the following round I can, make my knit front back because I see the knit stitch underneath. Okay, the important thing is while you're working your yoke, and this is how your yoke will look like after, a lot of rounds by making the increases and the knit round, is to try it on and see how it's growing on your body, and then we will see when to finish your yoke and put the stitches for the sleeves on hold and work on the body. As I said before, how can I try it on if I'm working with a 60 centimeter cable because I knit quick? I use a cable connector, in order to make the cable longer, and I usually choose a cable, let's say 1 meter long, in order to make it easy to try it on and have a loose cable and all the stitches perfectly even on my cables. Now here I'm trying to take all the stitches out. I'm trying to find the cable connector in order to show you what it looks like. Okay, here almost there. So now I can show you what my cable connector looks like. It's like this little thing that joins, here it is, 2 cables, and you just put it on and wind it on and on, and this is the longer cable. And now we are going to try it on and see when to put stitches on hold. Okay, ready? Now I'm trying on my yoke, and here I've made 25 rounds, 25 repeats of 1 round of increases and 1 round of knit stitches for a total of 50 rounds. So now by trying it on, I need to understand if I am at this point. See, if you look at me, this point over here is the classical point considered for the end of a classical yoke. I pick also the 2 stitch markers, the one in the front and the one in the back, in order to understand how many stitches to cast on for my body proportions that I want to have. Now, every body proportion is different, and if you consider 1 meter of circumference, it doesn't mean it's the same for a professional swimmer that it might have a very large back and muscles, or a lady with a tinier back but has 1 centimeter of circumference. So we need to understand also body proportions to make those changes also when we follow pattern and structure in order to have the fit that we like. See, I have a wide front, as you can see from my 2 stitch markers. So now I'm going to pick the 2 stitch markers, and with a measuring tape I'm going to measure the distance between the 2 markers in order to understand how many stitches I really need for the body size I would like to have. I take these centimeters and measure them on the sweater or on my sample gauge, and then I count the stitches that I need to cast on in my underarm to obtain the vestibility I would like. Okay, ready. Before going on, I wanted to show you what happens at my yoke when I'm working all the stitches with the increases, and a little bit about numbers. I have my 72 stitches that I have casted on, so I have what are 24 stitches in front, 24 stitches in the back, and then the other third I've divided in half and I have 12 stitches on my shoulder points. Of course, I have 12 center marker M, so I'm going to have 12 stitches on each side divided. I have small M markers, the 4 markers for my raglan increases, and that I will make, and then here I'll put on hold the stitches after the end of the yoke. Now, what happens when I'm working in the round and I want to understand how many stitches I'm going to have after a couple of rounds in the front? The important thing is to understand that each time we make an increase on 1 marker, we make on a raglan line 2 increases. So if we count them all, we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 increases in 1 round. So what happens if I work 8 rounds of increases? I will have overall 80 more stitches. And let's make another example. What if I make 20 increase rounds? I will have at the end 160 more stitches extra. We have to consider the casted on stitches. So if I want to know how many stitches I have in the front, I know that I'll have 2 stitches every time, extra stitches every time I make a round of increases. So if I have 10 rounds, I have 20 more stitches. So we have 44 stitches after 10 rounds of increases. This is important to understand what happens when we work in the round. Of course, we have to consider that I'm speaking only about the increase rounds, but when we work our yoke, we make one round of increases and one round of only 10 stitches. So if I said 20 rounds of increases, we have worked overall 40 rounds. This is important to remember. So 20 rounds of increases and 40 overall. Okay, ready after having tried on my yoke. Now I can take off the connector and work with my 60 centimeter cable with the regular points, because I love to do it, because I feel I knit very quicker, faster, because I have all the stitches next to each other. Now I have my beginning of the round marker here, that when I try on my sweater I usually leave some stitches before or after, because so I'm sure I'm not going to lose it while try it on. Now what happens, I have to knit to the first sleeve marker, marker 1, and I'm going to remove my beginning of the round marker and place it under the first underarm, because when we have our sweater and we are going to work on the body and then make the final border, if we have the marker on this side and we weave in ends there, on the back we have a much cleaner work and everything is nicer. So now I'm going to knit to my marker, because I had some stitches left from the last round of the yoke. I'm going to remove my marker, because I'm going to place it afterwards in the underarm, and now I'm going to knit to the first marker. What happens? Now I am going to cast on, after placing the stitches for the sleeve on hold, the number of stitches that I have calculated before by using the measurement tape and placed it on my sample or on my cardigan. And since my body seems to be quite wide, I think I'm going to cast on only 4 stitches, maybe 6, but now I will decide before arriving to my marker. No, I'm just joking. I've decided for 4 stitches. So in between the 4 stitches, I'm going to place my beginning of the round marker. Now I'm at the first here, see, marker. Now I can remove all the raglan increase markers, and my first sleeve is between my first marker and the second one. I need a tapestry needle and some thread. I advise to use a thread of the same width than the working thread, and of a different color, contrasting color better, because so when you're going to replace the stitches on the cables for working on the sleeves, it's much easier. So what do I do now? I take my tapestry needle and I move all the stitches by doing this on the thread. By one, I just place them on the tapestry needle and then on the thread. I like to cut a quite long thread to put on all the stitches, because I like to try on the sweater while working the body, especially if we're working in a creative way as we are doing now, because we are working by following in a creative way our proportions and taste. So maybe I might want to make an A line with some increases. Actually, for my type of sweater and how I want to wear it, I'm going to make it quite straight and not too boxy and not too long. But it's nice to try it on and see how also the yarn moves on our body, so we can make some changes just to have the perfect sweater we want to wear. Some people like to use the connecting the cables, the 40 centimeter cables with cable stoppers for the sleeves, but it's more difficult to try it on and see how it drapes around our body with the cable and the stoppers, so I prefer to use the thread. Now I'm reaching my second marker because as you know, between our first and second marker we have the first sleeve, and between the third one and the fourth one we have the second sleeve. So now when I reach the second marker, I take the needle off the thread, I pull off the second marker, we don't need them anymore, and I make at the point a knot, so I will have a long thread and it's easy to try on my sweater. And so now I have all the stitches of the sleeve on hold. See, now you can start to see the first sleeve. What do we do now? We have to cast on the stitches. My favorite method to cast on stitches for the underarm is the back loop cast on. So what do? We see this is my right side of the work, and in order to use the back loop cast on, I have to turn around my work like this, and I'm going to knit a stitch through the first stitch on my left hand needles. When I knit it, I like to place it through the back loop like this because I find that it makes a more defined border, and when I'm going to pick up stitches for the sleeve, it's going to be a clear border. So now I'll just make another knit stitch by picking all the threads, and so here it is, my second one through the back loop, and now I have to place the beginning of the round marker on my needle. But usually I prefer to do this. I cast on the third one, then I place the needle, and then I place the marker. I place the marker, and then I place the third stitch, and make the fourth one. Now I'm ready to turn around and be again on the right side of my project, and I can simply start working the stitches that I find on my needle, that's the front part of my sweater. So now you can start to see the form of the yoke and the body and the underarm. See, this is the underarm, this is my sleeve, and now I will just work all the stitches of the front of my sweater up to the third marker, the next one that I found on my needles, and I just do the same for this second armhole. I'll have some thread and I will put all the stitches on hold between the third and fourth marker, and then I'll cast on the stitches underneath, and I'm ready to work on the body now. Let's see how my project looks like now. This is the back because I have the tail where I've casted on the stitches, my folded neckline. Here you can see the nice raglan line, and then we have our armhole, and then the thread and all the stitches. See, I like to use the 60 centimeter cables with regular points, as I told you before, because I have many stitches together next to each other and I knit much faster. I have my beginning of the round marker under the first underarm, and here see how nice the raglan line looks like. And if I look at the creative effect of all the threads knitted together, I must say I really like it, and I'm really looking forward. Now I'm going just to knit in the round on my body and see how it works. While working on the body, remember to try on the sweater to see how it's growing, how it's fitting, if the body proportions are exactly how you want them, and if you have casted on the exact amount of stitches for the underarm, and how it's going to fit on what you're going to wear with it. I'm going to wear it with high waist pants, so I think it looks quite nice, and I'm just going to start the border. And I'm going to have a ribbing one by one in the neckline. Just make sure to have a number of stitches that can be divided by 2 if you're going to make a ribbing one by one. If you don't have it, you might cast on 1 stitch or make a 1 decrease in 1 round just to have the right number of stitches. If you want to make a ribbing 2 by 2, you need to have a number of stitches that can be divided by 4 because you're going to knit 2 stitches and rib 2 stitches. Now I really like it how it looks, so I'm going to just start the border by knit 1, purl 1, because I've chosen the ribbing 1 by 1. Finished my border by making knit 1, purl 1 ribbing, and now I'm ready and binding off my stitches. I have used the same number of points for the body and the border because I want a more squared look appear by wearing it with high-waisted pants. But if you want to have a more narrow border, you can make some decreases before the border and then work with a number smaller needles in order to make it narrow. Now I'm going to bind off with a classical bind off by passing the second stitch over the first one, and I've worked the stitches as they appear, knit stitches on knit stitches and purl stitches on purl stitches. Now I've already cut the thread for the video, so I'm just going to pull the thread through. I wanted to make a consideration on the binding off. The important thing is that to have an elastic border, you have to work and bind off stitches in a way that they are loose as the working stitches. If they are too loose, it's going to be a wavy border. Too tight, it's going to be also uncomfortable to see and wear because you have tight stitches. If you see that you're going to work too tight, you might change the points to half a number bigger in order to help you and make a nice smooth bind off edge with the same elasticity as the ribbing border. That's quite important because if it's too tight, it's not comfortable. Now, after binding off, I'm going to show you a little trick with the tail and the first chest and last stitch. Okay, now I have the 4 threads and it's quite difficult because I took a really pointed needle, but so this is my fin. It's 1,500 meters for 100 grams, and it's a lovely thread that I usually use also with my Stil mohair and silk in order to make sweaters. Now I think I need another needle because all these threads, I've chosen this tapestry needle for the pointed really pointy points, but now let's wait. I'll take another needle with a little bit bigger so it's going to be easier to thread all my 4 threads on it. So we can move on with the movie. Now I'm going to thread it and I will show you this little trick in order to make a very polished finish for the first and last stitch that we have binded off. I'll take my point. Look, when we knit in the round, we think we knit rounds, and we actually knit spirals, so we have this little step between the first and last stitch on our bind off edge. So what do? I take my point and I go through the 2 threads that make my first bind off stitch. By picking them, I can help myself to make it easier like this, and then see that I go through the first stitch, I bind it off and I pull the thread, and then I go through the 2 stitches of the last stitch, I bind it off through the loop like that, and I make like an extra stitch, but this extra stitch will make my bind off edge nice and smooth. See how it looks like? I can go again through the first loop and the second one if I want to make it even more defined and tight like this, and then now I'm ready to weave in my end. Now I'm ready to work my sleeves in the round, and I'm going to use shorter points with a 40 centimeter cable. See, I have replaced already the stitches on the cable, but I still have the thread underneath because it helps me to check if I have picked up all the stitches, and this is why it's easier if you have a contrasting color thread for when you put them on hold, because you can see them much better. I checked that I have picked up all the stitches. Usually with thinner threads, it might happen that you forget one stitch stitch when you replace them on the needles and the cable. So after you have checked, you can easily cut the thread and pull it away because we don't need it any longer. So you just pull and you know, here it is. And now you have all the stitches on your cables. Now we are ready to start working on the sleeves. This is the underarm, and you can see here that you have the 4 casted on stitches where we are going to pick up stitches. But what happens, you see that here you have, after the 4 stitches, you have this slanted line. So if we pick up only 4 stitches, here you will see a hole when we start working the first stitch. So that's why so often in my pattern instructions, you will find, if you have casted on 4 stitches, to pick up 8 stitches, and you will use 2 on the one slanted line and 2 on the other slanted line. In this way we have a really polished line for the pickup edge. What happens when we just take the working thread that I have my 4 threads worked together, and they make together this beautiful shade that I'm working with. I just choose a long tail and I put it inside. I like a long tail because then when I weave it in, if I have a loose loop or loose stitch, I can hide it better if it might happen. And I need one marker that will, here it is, indicate my beginning or end of the round where I will knit my sleeves in the round. When I pick up stitches, I do not use the extreme point because it might look loose. I just go 1 stitch underneath and I choose the tighter loops to pick up stitches, so it will be nicer and cleaner. So the first one are in the slanted edge, then I will pick up the 2 stitches in the cast on edge. So I have 4 stitches of the 8 that I'm going to cast on, and I'm going to place the marker in the middle. Now I can just go on and pick up other 2 stitches on the cast on edge, and then now see, if I would start working right away, I would just make a hole. So now I need to pick up the 2 stitches that I still have to pick up, and I choose the tighter loops. Now I can just start working in the round. My sleeves are worked in the round, and I'm going to show you how to make the little puff effect by working just straight all around, and then we will make the final ribbing border. Now see here that I have my sleeve, and I just work by knitting. I have my tail that I'm going to use in the end to weave in, and then I have the beginning of the round of the marker. Let's work on the sleeves now. Okay, ready? Here I am trying on my sweater. I really like it how it looks also with my high-waisted pants. Now let's talk about the sleeve. I have knitted all the rounds in order to make this sleeve, and see, now I have to reach my wrist with my sleeve like this in order to then make the final border and have that fluffy effect that I showed you in the beginning. So I've knitted up to this point. In order to have that effect, I'm going to make some decreases, and you have to check also your body proportions in order to understand how many decreases you're going to make. I will show you now how I worked next with the decreases to make it. Okay, right now I'm going to make the decreases by knitting 2 stitches together for the entire round, because I may check the body proportions. So if I make all knit together along all my round, I'll have the perfect proportion for my wrist. What happens when you're going to make the ribbing, and you need a number of stitches that it's a multiple of your ribbing proportion. So I'm going to make 1 by 1 ribbing, so I need a number of stitches that can be divided by 2. If you make a 2 by 2 ribbing, you might need a number of stitches divided by 4. So check the number and make one decrease less or more to have the right number of stitches. After having checked the number of stitches that I have in order to make the 1 by ribbing, so I have a number of stitches that is divided by 2, I make my ribbing section, and I'm going to knit 1 and purl 1. As you can see, the wrist size is very small, so I can use what is a classical magic loop with 80 centimeter cables and regular points, or you might think about using the double pointed needles. If you have never used them, I have a tutorial for the Fiorellino cuffs where I show how to use double pointed needles. But I didn't want to change needles, so I'm going to use the 40 centimeter cable with the shorter points in this way. It's a sort of a magic loop technique with a shorter cable. It's a little bit tricky, but you can do it. I will show you. You make the 2 loops and you start working by following your ribbing repetitions, so the knit and purl stitches. And you see that I have the 2 loops, and I will show you also a little trick in the case, and you can use this also for the double pointed needles or the classical magic loop, because when we arrive at the end of the stitches I have to work, I will show you. Because what happens when you always have the loops, the cable loops, in the same point, it might happen that in that point you have a looser line because your gauge is a little bit different. Here you might have, looser stitches. So what I advise you is to change the cable loops point by, making it a couple of stitches after you had it before, or and you can do it on both sides. So in this way, by alternating the point, the placement point of the cable loops, you are sure that you will not have that loose line of stitches. Now, it's only a little border, so it might look tricky, but in this way I didn't change needles and I made my nice border. I'm going to repeat the ribbing for 10 rounds and the final border, and then cast off the edges and weave in ends as I've done for the final border of the body. Okay, ready? I'm so happy. This is my sweater. Okay, Luna is ready. So what did I do? I have knitted the second sleeve as the first one. I have counted all the rounds that I had worked for the first sleeve. I did the same for the second, and I worked the cuff. Now, my sweater is finished and I'm so happy with it. It really fits as I wanted. I only have to weave in the threads when I've finished, and I have the one at the bottom, the back, and on the sleeves. Now the one in the underarm, I can use it to hide a little bit if I have a loose loop. That's why I advise you to have a longer tail when you move started working the sleeves, because then you can use that thread. Now, after you have finished your project, you are ready to wear it. Well, we need blocking, but if you want to go out to dinner with your friends, you can just iron it and wear it. But now, the important thing is what we should do with blocking. We need to gently wash by hand our garment. You put it in gentle water, not too hot, with the right soap that's perfect for wool or delicate garments, and you put it there and wash it. After you have washed it, you will start blocking. You pick up a towel and you roll it in the towel, and by pressing it, you take all the extra water out. This is an important part because the water is heavy. It will, make it its effect. So you take the towel. Now, then you put, I usually use a sport towel with, microfibers, because they do not like as other towels, soak all the water so it dries easily and faster. And I put it flat on, not on the floor because I have 2 cats and a dog, so a higher, a table or something. And you put it there to dry, and you can use and you block it. You put it in place. You pull it in the width or length that you wanted. And you can use also this to make a little changes. If feel that it's too wide, you can pull it in length and have the perfect fitting. This is an important part, and it's important also for the sample that you need to have, because if you have a thread that duplicates itself with washing, you need to know it from your sample. And here we are with the finished sweater at the end of the tutorial by making your sweater, Luna, by following your taste and proportion. Here, Luna, and I hope you liked it and you found this video useful, so you can make your own versions of the Luna sweater by following your taste and proportion. You can use the comments here below if you need any questions, and I will answer you. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you'll find me as Emma Fassio, and see you next video tutorial. Bye!